The SOS signal. The galaxy was not silent that night. Across the cold void, a desperate signal echoed. It was a cry for help, a voice trembling through the stars. The coalition of alien worlds, once proud and strong, was now on its knees. Their fleets were shattered, their colonies burned. Their enemy, the swarm, was endless, a tide of claws and steel that consumed everything in its path. From the bridge of the alien flagship, Admiral Relth pressed his trembling hands against the console. His voice cracked as he gave the order. Send the SOS. Send it to everyone, to every star, to every empire. Someone must hear us. The officers around him obeyed, though their faces were pale. For months, they had sent requests for aid, but no answer had come. The great empires of the galaxy were too far, too slow, or too afraid. But now this was different. This signal carried more than words. It carried their survival. The message spread, carried by beacons, amplified by ancient relays. It crossed the emptiness between suns. It leaped from system to system like a plea from a dying soul. Please, help us. Please, we cannot hold them back. The swarm will devour us all. And then came silence. The aliens waited. Hours passed. Then days. The darkness outside their viewports felt heavier than ever. Some whispered that no one would come. Some whispered that the signal had been a mistake, that it had only announced their weakness to predators who might exploit it. Admiral Relth sat in his command chair, staring at the stars. His people had always believed in unity, in alliances, in strength through numbers. But tonight, unity was a ghost. Suddenly, a comm officer cried out, "Admiral, we have a reply." Every officer turned, their hearts pounding. A voice crackled through the speakers, distorted and rough, nothing like the smooth tones of galactic channels. "This is Earth Command. We received your distress call." The bridge fell silent. Aliens exchanged confused glances. Earth? The humans? Whispers filled the room. Humans were little more than rumors in most corners of the galaxy. They were called Deathworlders, creatures from a savage, hostile planet where storms, beasts, and poisons tried to kill them every day. Civilized, empires avoided them, regarding humanity as dangerous, unpredictable, and primitive. The Admiral frowned. Humans? They cannot help us. They have no fleet strong enough. Their world is isolated. They are children compared to the great powers. But the human voice continued, steady and calm. "We are coming. Hold your ground. A fleet has been dispatched." The officers looked at one another, some in disbelief, others in grim amusement. A fleet? From Earth? Surely this was madness. What could Deathworlders bring that mighty empires could not? Yet something lingered in that voice, a confidence that chilled the air. Admiral Relth leaned forward. "How many ships? What kind of support?" The human response was simple. "Enough." The comm went dead. The aliens stared in stunned silence. No one spoke for a long time. At last, one officer laughed bitterly. "Enough? That is their answer? It will take more than words to stop the swarm." And yet, deep in his chest, Relth felt a strange flicker. Hope? Or was it fear? He could not tell. Outside, the stars glittered cold and distant. Somewhere beyond them, beyond the Shadow Gate, the humans were moving. The Shadow Gate was ancient, a massive slip-space portal left behind by forgotten builders. Few dared to use it. It was unstable, unpredictable. For the Coalition, it was a barrier. For the humans, it was a doorway. Relth did not know if humanity truly had a fleet. He did not know if they would arrive in time. But he knew one thing. If Deathworlders said they were coming, then the galaxy would soon learn what that meant. As the hours turned to days, alien fleets gathered at the edge of the dying system. Burned hulls floated like tombstones. Refugee transports shivered in orbit, waiting for protection that never came. The swarm was regrouping, ready for its final push. The alien captains argued. Some wanted to flee, to abandon the world below. Others said to wait, though waiting felt like suicide. All eyes kept turning back to the void, to the gate, to the silence where the humans should be. And then, the silence broke again. Sensors detected movement. Small at first, tiny signatures, like sparks against the dark. A cluster of ships slipped through the unstable gate, crude shapes, rugged hulls, armor scorched from battle. They were nothing like the sleek, elegant cruisers of the core empires. The aliens stared. Was this it? Was this the so-called Deathworlder fleet? Laughter rippled through some ranks. These are raiders, not saviors. This is all humanity has? But Admiral Relth did not laugh. His eyes narrowed as the sensors lit up again. More signatures, larger, heavier. The void began to tremble with the mass of what followed. One dreadnought emerged, then another, and another. The alien bridge fell silent as ship after ship unfolded from the shadow gate, filling the darkness with iron and fire. Admiral Relth's voice was a whisper. Deathworlders. For the first time in weeks, his trembling stopped. The SOS had been heard, and the answer was coming. The arrival of the unexpected, the shadow gate shimmered like a wound in space. For a long time it had been nothing but ruins from an older age, avoided by most empires. Now it pulsed with strange light as ships kept slipping through. First came small human vessels, frigates, and corvettes. Their armor looked rough, patched, and practical, not polished like the shining cruisers the Coalition once knew. The alien fleets gathered at a safe distance, watched with disbelief. Their scanners swept across the human ships and fed back results. The readings were strange. The hulls were heavier than expected. The reactors were hot, almost unstable. The weapon systems were crude in design but overloaded with power. They build without elegance, one alien captain muttered. Like savages stacking rocks. Another officer snorted. Deathworlders. What did we expect? They fight like their planet, brutal and ugly. The bridge of Admiral Relth's flagship was quiet. He leaned forward, studying the incoming fleet. The first wave of human ships spread out, forming a protective net around the wounded Coalition carriers. Their movements were disciplined, fast, and strangely aggressive. It was as if every pilot expected to die, but wanted to die with teeth bared, and then the gate pulsed again. This time it was not small ships, it was something far larger. The void trembled as the first human dreadnought came through. The aliens gasped. The ship was massive, blocky, and armored like a floating fortress. The glow of its engines painted the stars with fire. Then another followed, and another. Soon the gate seemed too small for what kept crawling out of it. Alien. Sensors went wild. Each dreadnought carried enough firepower to match a dozen Coalition cruisers. The fleet count kept climbing. 12, 20, 30. The Coalition commanders stared in silence. What they thought was humanity's entire strength was only the beginning. They said a fleet. One officer whispered. This is an armada. But even with the sight of human might before, them doubt remained. The swarm was still coming. Reports from scouts told of endless clusters moving through space, preparing to fall upon the system like locusts. The question was not if they would come, but when. Suddenly a human voice cut across the shared comms channel, calm, low, and full of certainty. This is Admiral Hayes of Earth Command. Coalition allies, hold your positions, we'll take the front. The aliens stared at one another. No request for aid, no hesitation, just a command as if the humans already owned the battlefield. Admiral Relth felt something strange. For the first time in weeks, he was not afraid of the swarm. He was afraid of the humans. The fleet repositioned itself. Human dreadnoughts formed a wall at the system's edge, their smaller escorts weaving between them like wolves among giants. The discipline was uncanny. Not a single movement wasted. Not a single opening left exposed. Coalition captains whispered to each other on private channels. Do you see this? They are not improvising. They are trained for this. Trained to fight the swarm? No, trained to fight something worse. The moment hung heavy. Then the alarms blared. The swarm had arrived. From the darkness, countless signals lit up scanners, organic warships, living hives of teeth and claws surging like a tide. The aliens braced themselves, expecting the humans to fall back or scatter. That was what the coalition had done so many times before. But the humans did not move back. Instead, Admiral Hayes gave a single order. Open fire. The wall of dreadnoughts roared. Beams lanced across the void, cutting through the first wave of swarm ships as if they were made of paper. Railgun slugs streaked across the darkness, punching holes through armored carapaces. Explosions bloomed like stars. The aliens gasped as thousands of enemy signatures vanished in the first volley alone. Still, the swarm pressed on. They always pressed on. Their numbers were infinite. But the humans did not break formation. Their smaller ships darted forward, weaving traps and laying mines. The dreadnoughts advanced, step by step, turning the battlefield into a killing ground. On the coalition bridges, silence reigned. Captains who once mocked Deathworlders now watched with wide eyes. They could not deny what they were seeing. Humanity was not fighting like a desperate species. Humanity was fighting like predators who had waited a long time for prey. Admiral, Relth whispered to himself, his voice trembling. They said they would send enough Indal, and they meant it. The swarm surged again, faster, harder. Clusters tried to flank. Others dived at the refugee transports, but every move was countered. Human escorts hunted like wolves, tearing apart anything that slipped through. Their dreadnoughts became immovable mountains, crushing wave after wave. At last, the aliens understood. These ships, this fleet, were not new. They were scarred, tested, hardened in battles the coalition had never even heard of. Earth had been preparing for something like this for centuries, and as the second wave of swarm ships exploded into dust, the aliens realized something even more terrifying. This was not the full strength of humanity. This was only their answer to a simple SOS. First contact with fear. The battle was only minutes old, yet the void already burned with wreckage. Alien eyes across the system watched in shock as human firepower carved holes through the swarm's endless tide. What they had expected to be a desperate last stand was turning into something else, a massacre. Still, the swarm was vast. For every wave destroyed, another gathered in the dark. Their organic warships pulsed with strange energy, releasing smaller craft like clouds of insects. The aliens had seen this before. They knew what came next: the endless push, the overwhelming numbers, the collapse of courage. But this time, something was different. The humans did not falter. On the flagship Iron Resolve, Admiral Hayes stood at the command table. His voice was calm, steady, almost cold. Hold formation. Do not waste fire. Every shot counts. His officers obeyed with ruthless precision. Data scrolled across their displays. Targeting locks, shield fluctuations, reactor levels. They spoke little. They did not need to. Each had trained for battles that demanded perfection, and tonight they fought as if Earth itself watched them. From the alien flagship, Admiral Relth listened to the humans' short transmissions. He heard no panic, no fear, only clipped orders. Squadron 3, intercept. Dreadnought 2, increase reactor flow. Target cluster Delta. Fire. It chilled him more than the swarm itself. Coalition fleets had always fought with desperation. They shouted, they begged, they panicked, but the humans and they were calm. Too calm. One of Relth's officers whispered, "Admiral, are they even afraid of death?" Relth did not answer. He was not sure. The swarm struck harder. Clusters of living ships broke past the first human volley, diving toward the coalition's fragile transports. Alien hearts froze. They had seen this moment before. This was always the end. But before the swarm reached the helpless ships, human frigates streaked in. Engines roared, guns blazing. They moved with reckless speed, interposing themselves between predator and prey. Explosions tore through the void as the frigates rammed, fired, and sacrificed with no hesitation. Alien crews gasped. Who would willingly throw away their lives like this? Yet the humans fought not with despair, but with grim purpose. Their losses were not wasted. They bought time, position, and victory. Then came the dreadnoughts. The giants advanced, firing beams so bright they lit entire sectors like miniature suns. The swarm ships disintegrated under the fury. Carapaces cracked. Hive minds screamed across comms. The tide broke for the first time in memory. Still, the aliens could not understand. Why were the humans not afraid? The swarm had shattered fleets, 100 times larger. Empires had fallen. Yet these deathworlders stood their ground as if the enemy were nothing more than wild beasts. On one channel, an alien commander cried, "Retreat! They'll kill us all." His fleet began to pull back, but then a human voice cut through. Admiral Hayes himself, his tone calm and sharp like a blade. "Stay where you are. If you run, they'll chase you. Stay and we'll cover you." The alien captain froze. Something in that voice commanded obedience. Against all instincts, his fleet held position. And true to Hayes's word, the humans shielded them. Swarm vessels that lunged for the retreating ships were torn apart in storms of fire. Relth felt his throat tighten. These humans were not only unafraid, they inspired fear. Not just in their enemies, but in their allies too. The more the aliens watched, the more uneasy they became. Humanity's tactics were brutal. Their weapons burned too hot. Their ships pushed too hard. They fought as if they cared nothing for safety, only for killing. One alien officer whispered, "They don't fight like a civilized species." Another answered, "No, they fight like predators." Hours passed. The battlefield was littered with wreckage, swarm and human alike. But the line held. For the first time in months, the coalition saw victory as possible. And yet, even in victory, a strange fear grew. The aliens realized something terrible. The swarm was not the only danger here. If humans could do this against an enemy that had crushed whole empires, what would happen if they ever turned against the galaxy itself? Admiral Relth stood at the viewport, his eyes fixed on the human dreadnoughts. Their guns glowed. Their hulls bore scars. Their crews fought with ruthless unity. He whispered to himself, too quietly for others to hear, "The swarm is not what we should fear. The real fear is them." And for the first time, he understood why the galaxy had whispered the word Deathworlders with both disgust and dread. Because the humans were not just survivors. They were monsters who had learned how to win. The human strategy. The battlefield was chaos. Shattered swarm carcasses drifted through the void, human frigates bled smoke, and the coalition's battered ships clung to survival. Yet in the middle of that storm, the human fleet moved with frightening order. From the iron resolve, Admiral Hayes studied the tactical map. His eyes scanned every detail: enemy clusters, weak points, reactor spikes, ship positioning. To the aliens watching, it looked impossible. How could any commander control so many ships in such a storm? But Hayes gave orders with precision, as if he had already fought this battle 100 times. Group Delta, faint left. Draw them in. Gamma, fold behind. Dreadnoughts, hold your fire until my mark, Hayes said. His voice was calm, almost cold. The fleet obeyed instantly. Human ships peeled away in strange, unpredictable patterns. Some exposed their flanks on purpose, daring the swarm to chase. The aliens on Relth's bridge gasped. "They've opened themselves, it's suicide!" But then it happened. The swarm surged into the gap like predators smelling blood. That was when Hayes gave the signal. Dreadnoughts. Fire. The void lit up as hidden human ships sprang the trap. Beams crossed from 3 directions at once, tearing the enemy apart. Carapaces split open, organic hulls cracked, and 1,000 swarm signals vanished in seconds. Admiral Relth gripped his chair. It was not luck. It was not desperation. It was design. Every reckless move had been calculated, every loss planned, for humanity did not fight blindly. They lured the enemy into death. Coalition officers whispered in disbelief. How? How can they think like this? No one risks ships this way. One older captain answered grimly. Because they are Deathworlders. Risk is the only thing they know. More maneuvers followed. The swarm tried to surround the humans, but Hayes had already anticipated it. His smaller ships split into wolf packs, striking at exposed weak points, before vanishing again. Coalition fleets had always tried to endure the swarm. Humans, however, hunted them. It was not elegant. It was brutal. But it worked. The aliens watched in silence as frigates darted through clouds of debris, as destroyers rammed swarm vessels head-on, and as dreadnoughts advanced like iron mountains, weapons burning hotter than seemed possible. Impossible, one officer whispered. Their reactors should have melted down long ago. Relth's jaw tightened. He understood. They are pushing past safe limits. On their world, nothing is safe. They do not ask if they will survive. They ask only if they will win. The realization sent a chill through the bridge. Humans did not design ships to last. They designed them to kill. Still, the swarm pressed on. Endless waves poured from the dark, clawing at the human lines. Every other fleet in the galaxy would have broken already. But the humans adjusted with frightening speed. Hayes spoke again. Alpha, burn reactors to 80%. You'll hold that flank even if it cooks your hull. Beta, swing wide, drop mines and fall back. Leave them no escape. The aliens were stunned. 80% reactor output? That will kill their crews. But the humans obeyed without hesitation. Ships glowed red as their cores strained. But they held. The swarm was pushed back step by step, trapped in a web of fire. Relth finally understood why the humans had come at all. They were not reckless. They were not insane. They had a strategy the Coalition had never dared to use. One, born from living on a world that tried to kill them every day. On Earth, storms crushed cities. Predators stalked every shadow. Diseases, quakes, and volcanoes struck without warning. To survive, humanity had learned not to hide behind walls, but to strike first, to risk everything, to adapt faster than death itself. Now that same thinking guided their fleets. The Coalition crews, once proud of their elegant tactics, now felt like children. They had been trained to preserve ships, to minimize risk, to retreat when the odds were bad. But the humans had turned risk into a weapon. As the swarm's latest wave broke apart in fire, Admiral Relth whispered, "They are not fighting the swarm. They are teaching it fear." For the first time in recorded history, the swarm hesitated. The enemy hive minds pulled back slightly, unsure, confused by the losses. They had never met prey that bit back so hard. On every Coalition screen, human dreadnoughts advanced through clouds of fire, their guns never silent. The sight was terrifying and unforgettable. One alien officer trembled. If they can do this to the swarm, what could they do to us? Relth had no answer. His eyes stayed locked on the humans, his chest tight with both relief and dread. The SOS had been sent in desperation. The Coalition had expected mercy, rescue, perhaps even pity. But what arrived was something else entirely. A fleet of predators forged by a death world, a strategy born not from survival but from domination. And as the human fleet pressed deeper into the tide, the galaxy realized something chilling. Humanity was not just here to fight. They were here to win, at any cost. The turning point, the A. Void shook with fire. Human dreadnoughts blazed forward, their cannons burning like suns, their smaller ships weaving in deadly packs. For the first time in memory, the swarm had slowed. But slowing was not the same as stopping. Deep in the black, the hive minds stirred. New signals bloomed, bigger, denser, hungrier. The next wave was coming. On the iron resolve, Admiral Hayes stood tall, his eyes fixed on the tactical map. He knew the swarm well enough already. They always adapted. They always found a way. Victory was never given. It had to be taken, and it had to be taken brutally. "Prepare," Hayes said simply. His voice carried across the human fleet like steel. "The swarm is about to show us everything it has." Across the coalition ships, alien captains trembled. Some began whispering about retreat again. But then the human channels lit up, short, sharp, steady voices. "Stand firm, hold the line, no one breaks." And somehow, that steadiness spread. Even frightened aliens clung to their posts, unwilling to move when the humans refused. Then, the darkness moved. The next wave of swarm ships arrived, not small hives but massive leviathans. Their hulls pulsed with organic armor, thicker than anything seen before. Tentacles of living steel writhed through the void. They opened their maws, releasing storms of acid and fire that melted debris in seconds. Alien crews gasped in horror. Entire fleets had fallen to a single leviathan before. Now there were dozens. The coalition captains screamed across the channels, "Fall back! We can't face this!" But Hayes did not move. His eyes narrowed. His voice was calm. "Dreadnoughts advance, wolf packs, draw them in." The aliens shouted in disbelief. Advance? Against that? But the humans obeyed without question. The dreadnoughts surged forward, their beams hammering at the Leviathan's shields. The smaller ships darted like knives, slashing at weak points, laying mines, firing railguns until their barrels glowed red. The swarm struck back. One Leviathan's maw opened wide, vomiting a storm of acid that engulfed a human destroyer. The ship screamed across comms before its signal went dark. Another Leviathan's tentacles lashed out, smashing a frigate into shards. The void lit with fire and death. Coalition officers covered their mouths in horror. "They're being slaughtered. The humans are finished." But then something happened. Something no alien commander had expected. The humans didn't fall back. They didn't scatter. They tightened their formation. Admiral Hayes gave the order. "Now, collapse the wings." From both flanks, human ships swung inward. Mines detonated behind them, sealing escape routes. Dreadnoughts at the center fired in unison, pouring every ounce of reactor power into one blinding strike. The Leviathans roared as the trap closed around them. Alien eyes widened as they realized the truth. The humans had lured the Leviathans in, just like they had with the smaller swarm ships before. They had sacrificed frigates and destroyers not recklessly, but deliberately, each lost to tighten the noose, to feed the trap. The coalition fleets had always feared the Leviathans. To them, these monsters were unstoppable, but to humanity they were just prey. The human dreadnoughts fired again. One Leviathan cracked open, its organic core erupting in flames. Another was split apart, its tentacles flailing in death throes. The battlefield shook with the fury of collapsing giants. The aliens were stunned into silence. Their scanners blinked with impossible numbers. Dozens of Leviathans destroyed in minutes. Admiral Relth could not breathe. He had spent his life fighting the swarm, always retreating, always losing, always begging for survival. And yet here these humans had done the unthinkable. This is impossible," one officer whispered. "No," Relth said softly, his voice trembling. "This is human." But victory was not yet complete. More swarm ships surged forward, enraged by the death of their Leviathans. Smaller hives swarmed the human flanks, clawing at their armor. The battlefield was chaos once more. Yet the fear had shifted. For the first time in history, the swarm hesitated. The hive minds, always relentless, slowed their charge. They retracted some forces, uncertain. The predators had tasted pain, and they did not understand it. The turning point had come. On every alien ship, crews whispered in awe. They had never seen the swarm pause. They had never seen them bleed like this. Admiral Hayes gave one last order, his voice calm, heavy, final. "Press forward. Break them here. Make them remember." The humans obeyed. Their fleet roared like a storm, pushing the swarm back step by step. The Leviathans were gone. The endless tide was cracking. The humans were not just holding the line anymore. They were winning. Admiral Relth stared through his viewport, his heart pounding. For the first time, hope returned. But with it came a deeper fear. Because if this was what humanity could do when answering an SOS, then what power still waited hidden behind the Shadow Gate? The galaxy had laughed at the Deathworlders, but now no one was laughing. The galaxy was afraid, the revelation of Earth's might. The battlefield was littered with wreckage. Burning swarm husks drifted across the void, glowing like fallen stars. Human dreadnoughts held their line. Engines, dim but steady, their guns still hot from endless fire. The coalition fleets floated behind them in silence, stunned by what they had seen. The swarm had retreated. Not far, not broken, but for the first time in centuries they had pulled back, their hive minds hesitating. The tide of destruction had paused. On the coalition flagship, Admiral Relth stared at the scanners in disbelief. His officers whispered to each other, voices hushed as if they feared the humans might hear them. They did it. The swarm withdrew. No fleet has ever done that. Are they even mortal? Relth said nothing. His eyes stayed locked on the human dreadnoughts. They were scarred, battered, some burning, yet they stood like iron mountains unshaken. Then across the comms, Admiral Hayes's voice came, calm, steady, as if this entire battle had been nothing more than routine. Coalition Command, report. Status of your fleets. Relth blinked. He almost laughed. Status? What status? His fleets were half destroyed, his people broken, and yet the humans spoke as though this was only the first round. He forced himself to answer. We are damaged, but stable. You truly drove them back. There was a pause. Then Hayes replied, his words heavy with quiet power. We did not drive them back. We only reminded them what waits in the dark when humanity moves. Those words struck harder than any weapon. Whispers broke across the coalition channels. What does he mean? Is this not their full force? How much more could they possibly have? The answer came in the form of movement. Sensors flared again. The Shadow Gate rippled once more. Coalition officers panicked, thinking the swarm was returning. But when the first shapes emerged, the bridges fell silent. They were not swarm ships. They were more humans. Bigger ships. Older ships. Ships so massive the gate strained around them as they came through. Super dreadnoughts, carriers, entire mobile fortresses. The alien crews froze. They had thought the first human fleet was overwhelming. But now, ship after ship poured out of the gate, each one larger, heavier, deadlier than the last. One officer whispered in horror, "That first fleet, it wasn't their full strength?" Another shook his head. No, it was only a vanguard. Admiral Relth felt his throat tighten. He had lived through dozens of campaigns, seen countless wars, but never this. The humans had answered their SOS with a fraction of their power. A fraction had done the impossible. And now, the rest was here. On the comms, Hayes spoke again. His voice was quiet, almost casual, but it echoed with something that made every alien tremble. Understand? This, what you've seen tonight, it was not Earth's full arm. It was our outstretched hand. The bridge went cold. Aliens looked at one another with wide, fearful eyes. They had begged for help, expecting mercy, pity, or even scorn. Instead, they had seen the iron fist of a Deathworlder Armada, and it was only the beginning. More ships continued to emerge. Carriers deployed entire wings of fighters. Mobile foundries lit their reactors, ready to rebuild even as the war raged. The scale was unimaginable. Relth's officers whispered nervously. If this is what they reveal so easily, what are they? Hiding still? Why would such a power answer our SOS? What do they gain? What if they decide not to leave? Relth closed his eyes. He knew the answer. Humans gained the one thing they always hungered for: leverage. The galaxy had ignored them, mocked them, treated them as savages. But now no one could ignore them, no one could mock them. Humanity had forced itself into the stage of great powers with fire and blood. Out in the void, the human fleet began to reform. Their damaged ships slid back into position, repaired and shielded by reinforcements. The dreadnoughts powered up, again engines glowing with steady fury. On every alien screen the message was clear. The humans were not finished. They were just getting started. Admiral Hayes gave his final words for the night, his voice cutting through the silence of shaken. Fleets, the swarm is not gone. They will return. When they do, we will be ready. If you stand with us, you'll survive. If you don't. He left the sentence unfinished. He didn't need to. Every alien in the system already knew the truth. Relth opened his eyes, staring at the endless line of human ships stretching across the stars. His people had begged for saviors. They had called for allies. But what had answered was far more dangerous. Not saviors. Not allies. Deathworlders, and with them, the galaxy itself would never be the same. The aftermath and legacy, the battlefield lay silent. Wreckage drifted through the void like broken bones scattered across an endless graveyard. Fires burned faintly, on shattered swarm husks, while human dreadnoughts floated steady and grim, their cannons cooling, their armor scarred but unbowed. The swarm had retreated deeper into the dark. They would return, everyone knew that. But for now, the system was safe. Safe, because humanity had come. On the Coalition flagship, Admiral Relth stood before the viewport, staring at the human fleet that now filled the stars. His officers whispered, behind him their voices hushed and fearful. They answered our SOS. Yes, but at what cost? Is this salvation, or a new master? Relth did not answer. His eyes were fixed on the endless lines of human ships still pouring through the Shadow Gate. It was more than he could comprehend. The fleet that had crushed the swarm's leviathans, that had saved his people from extinction, was only a vanguard. Behind it came super dreadnoughts, carriers, entire mobile fortresses. Humanity had revealed a glimpse of its might, and the galaxy would never forget it. Across the system, Coalition refugees cheered. Families on dying colonies wept with relief as human escorts delivered food, medicine, and power cells. To the weak and broken, humanity was a savior. To the soldiers and leaders who understood what they had seen, humanity was something far more dangerous. Admiral Hayes's voice came across the Coalition channels, calm and final. The swarm will be back. If you want to live, you will fight with us. If you refuse, you will fall alone. Earth has no time for cowards. The words echoed like a law. Hayes did not beg, did not plead. He commanded, and no one dared argue. In the weeks that followed, stories spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Refugees carried tales of the Deathworlder fleet that answered a desperate SOS. Alien captains whispered of dreadnoughts that fought like predators, of frigates that sacrificed themselves with purpose, of humans who stood unbroken where empires had collapsed. Fear traveled faster than light. At trading hubs, merchants spoke of Earth's iron armadas. At council chambers, politicians whispered, nervously, if they can break the swarm, what else can they break? Whole civilizations now debated not whether humans were allies, but whether they could afford to risk making them enemies. Admiral Relth watched the shift with quiet dread. His people were alive, yes, but they were also bound by debt, bound by fear. Humanity had come as a rescuer, yet it had left the shadow of power behind. Still, he could not deny what he had seen. The swarm had never been stopped, never even slowed until humans arrived. For that, gratitude was real. For that, his people survived another day. But Relth also knew the truth whispered in the back of every mind. Humanity had not shown everything. The fleet that shattered the swarm was only a taste of what lay hidden beyond the Shadow Gate. No one knew how deep Earth's strength ran, or how many more dreadnoughts waited in silence. At night, Relth could still hear Hayes's words in his head. This was not Earth's full arm. It was our outstretched hand, a hand that had saved them, a hand that could just as easily crush them. On the day the humans departed deeper into the void, their engines blazing blue fire, Relth stood at his viewport and whispered to himself, We called for help, and the Deathworlders answered. May the galaxy remember this day, and remember it did. Legends spread. Entire species retold the story. How the galaxy's most desperate cry for aid had been answered not by the proud empires, but by the Deathworlders of Earth. How humans had fought without fear, without hesitation, and forced the swarm to retreat. Children on distant colonies grew up whispering about the fleet behind the Shadow Gate. Merchants painted human dreadnoughts on their banners to ward off raiders. Even warlords hesitated before making new enemies, for fear that somewhere, somehow, the Deathworlders might be listening. Fear was humanity's legacy that day, but so was hope. For in the ashes of the battlefield, the galaxy realized something it had long forgotten. The swarm was not unstoppable. Death was not inevitable. There were still predators among the stars who would not bow, who would not break. Predators, who called themselves human. And though the SOS had been sent as a cry of weakness, its answer had reshaped history. From that moment on, every empire, every coalition, every wandering people would remember the day the humans came, the day the galaxy first saw Earth's iron armadas, the day the Deathworlders rose from the shadows, the day hope and fear became the same thing, the day humanity's legacy began.